Today in Agronomy on KFIL AM 1060 with Pioneer Field Agronomist Allie Wise and Josh Schaffner. Here's Josh and Allie.
Good morning, Southeast Minnesota. It's November 18th, 2020, and this is episode 48. Allie, we took a week off there, just kind of had some things get in the way there last week, so we apologize for listeners that maybe had to listen to the same show twice, but we are back here this week. Always an exciting time of the year. We've been talking a lot about harvest getting close to the end, and we got wrapped up. And let's see, I think this is our 7th edition of the Agronomy Summary Book. We got published and available, and thought maybe we spend a little bit of time talking about that and going through some of the highlights of the soybean growing season on segment 1, and then talk a little bit more about corn in segment 2.
Yeah, so it's nice to have the Agronomy Summary Book. I've been telling everyone they're hot off the press, so get your copy or ask one of us for one of those. But like you said, we're going to hit on soybeans here in segment 1. I think just in general for starters, just talking through how yields were in general on the soybean side of things, or where we ended up ultimately. I know we've talked a lot about where we were sitting earlier in the season, but now that we're all wrapped up here, I think just a quick overview of maybe where we sat overall, and then on the enlist and extend side of things. So overall, kind of just average wise, Josh.
Yeah, if we go back to where we've tracked our PK sets and yield back to 2014, we did end up setting a record. We talked early on that we thought we would. We kind of compared or kind of combined the enlist set with the runner pretty to extend set, and the overall this year, if we combine all those locations, it averaged 70.9 bushel. Last year, just for reference, we were 61.5, so a big bump year over year. Our previous record was back in 2016. That was 69.8. So we were a little better than that. If we break that down and look at both sets, Allie, the extend set averaged 73.4 bushels, and the enlist set averaged 69.3 bushels. So even the enlist set standalone would have almost broke the record. And but combined, just some really good soybean yields across Southeast Minnesota in general.
Yeah. And so I think, just playing off of that a little bit, in your opinion, just for starters, I think we'll just go down the list of some of the factors that really drove yield on the soybean side of things. Maybe just starting with fertilizer spread and how that factors in for starters.
Yeah, I think of the major 4 factors we'll cover, number one, I always stress, crop nutrition. And I don't want to go into a big fertility segment here. We can get into something like that during the off season, Allie. But the long of the story short is, if we really look at guys that are raising good beans year over year, when we look at their potassium and their phosphorus spread, they're spreading for each crop. So for example, if you're in a corn bean rotation, they're applying fertilizer, you could say after or before each crop. So they're applying P&K every single year and not maybe utilizing a system that they're applying, say this fall, and that's going to cover the next 2 crops. So that's just one thing I can't stress enough of is being out there spreading P&K annually, whether that be for corn production or soybean production. But to me, that's step 1 to getting a soybean crop off to a good start.
Yep. So I think rolling into step 2, I think that would just be early planting and how that factors in. So of our soybean replicated PKP plots we've had over the years, we've been able to split up kind of historical yield by planting days. So we have 4 years of data we're working off. And as we look at planting our plots in general, historically, our corn and soybean plots are generally being planted at the same time. So we look at for every day that you could be planting beans, that you're not planting beans, you're losing on average about 0.28 bushels per day. So if you look at that from a different angle, maybe you're just planting your corn and you're going to wait. You're planting corn, and 10 days later you start planting your beans. You're already about $28 to $30 an acre behind if you look at that 0.28 bushels per day that you're missing out on for every day that you could be planting that you're not. So, you look at this year, our earlier planting date, potentially that's why we did see such a pleasantly surprise in some of the soybean crop yield. Certainly that's playing a factor there. So, it's an investment to have that second planter across your operation. But as you look at some of the numbers across the board of early planting and maybe pencil some of that out, it is something that makes one want to maybe take a harder look at that.
Yeah, and we talk about that every year. The trend is we see a few more operations doing that every year, and I don't anticipate that trend is going to slow down. I think each year we'll see more operations and producers jump into that arena having a second planter for beans. So great stuff. And then third, Allie, seed treatment. One thing that we maybe don't stress enough when we do publish our agronomy summary book, when we publish all of our soybean PKP plots, all of our entries we put in there are fully treated, fungicide, insecticide. We do also treat them with a levo. So I think it's important. That's something we maybe haven't stressed enough, that we do fully treat all these. But my long of the story short on that is we would never plant, a lot of our corn untreated. I think we need to take that same approach with soybeans, is to utilize our seed treatment, especially as we start planting earlier and earlier. I think it makes that seed treatment even have an increased bang for our buck compared to planting later. However, we see great, results planted early and late. It's just a different disease spectrum, but extremely important. And Allie, I think fungicide is another thing that, we can discuss, and a good point of number 4.
Yeah, I think fungicide just in general, looking at making that a piece of the puzzle on the soybean side of things, R3 timing, timing is everything in terms of fungicide around soybeans. I think it helps a lot just in terms of that plant health component on the soybean side of things, just letting that plant have more time to put yield on, staying healthier throughout the season. That's kind of a wrap on soybeans. We'll shift focus to corn when we come back from break.